Zeron was a peaceful planet in the far corner of the galaxy, where the Directions lived for many thousands of years. They ruled over many systems and believed they were the first smart race in the stars. Their buildings were tall and shining, their cities full of light, and their people proud and calm. They never feared anything from the stars because they believed there was nothing stronger than them. In schools, the young Directions learned about their history books, told them stories of weak old races that once tried to fly, but failed. They also spoke of a myth, a name long forgotten, a shadow in the stars called humans, but no one believed it was real. The teacher said it was just an old tale made to scare little Directions before sleep. Even the word human was rarely spoken across Zeron. People laughed when they heard it and called it a joke. From old-time scientists never found any real sign of this race, and so it was removed from most history pages. On a bright morning, the sky above Zeron was blue, and clear birds flew over silver towers, and the Directions moved about their day with joy. But something strange began to appear on the edge of the sky, a long, dark shape, slowly moving across the sunlight. At first, people thought it was a shadow, maybe a storm, maybe something blocking the sun. Then another dark shape appeared, then another, and another. Soon the sky was full of these dark shapes, moving slowly but with purpose. Talran, a young Dracian soldier, looked up and froze. His heart beat faster as more of the sky turned black. He spoke into his comms and asked the watchtower what was going on. The watchtower answered with confusion. They said their scanners could not read the objects, and they were too high, too silent, too perfect in shape. As more minutes passed, the shapes grew bigger, darker. The sunlight faded from the cities below. The shadows fell on towers, on parks, on homes. Parents held their children and pointed at the sky. Elders stood in silence, not knowing what to say. The fear was growing, and no one had any answers. In the capital, the High Council of the Directions gathered in panic, trying to understand what they were seeing. They asked their head scientist to explain, and he said they were ships, massive ships, covering the sky, bigger than anything ever made by the Directions. He added that these ships were not from any known race, not the Kalari, not the Bryn, not even the silent Zor who lived in black space. The council leader barked orders for defense units to prepare for contact. They still believed this might be a trick, a new enemy, maybe someone jealous of the Dracian power. But deep below the council tower, in a quiet library full of ancient scrolls, an old Dracian named Elder Mox slowly stood from his seat. He had studied the old stories, the ones erased, the ones marked forbidden. He walked slowly to the communication room where the council was shouting, and he asked them to listen. He told them this was not a trick, not a new enemy, not an unknown race. He said it was a return of the forgotten. The council laughed and asked him what he meant. He looked up at the dark sky and whispered one word: humans. Everyone went quiet for a moment, then burst into noise again. They said it was impossible. Humans never existed, and even if they did, they would be long gone. But then every screen, every device, every speaker across the planet came alive. A single message played in a voice unknown to Dracian ears, yet clear, strong, and cold. The voice said, "Humanity has returned." Children dropped their toys and stared. Elders looked at one another. Without words, guards readied their weapons, though unsure who to fight. The ships in the sky did not move. They only watched. Hours passed, but no answers came. Elder Mock spoke again. He said this was the beginning of something old, something buried deep. He warned the council to be ready, not with weapons, but with truth, because lies would not stop what was coming. The council sent a probe toward the ships. It flew fast and bright, a warning, a message of power. But before it reached the fleet, it vanished. It did not explode. It did not fall. It simply blinked out of space, as if erased. Now the Directions began to understand. This was not a war they could win with power, not a fight they could control. This was something else. This was history waking up. The streets went silent across Zeron. Even children felt the change in the air, the weight of the sky pressing down. In his room, Telran watched the ships above with wide eyes. He whispered to himself the word he never believed he would say: humans. The message repeated again and again across every screen. Humanity has returned. And still the ships waited. They waited like shadows, like ghosts from another time. No one knew what they wanted or why they had come. But the Directions knew one thing. Everything had changed. And the past was no longer sleeping. It was here, watching, waiting, and remembering. The sky above Veron was still dark. The ships had not moved, but their presence filled every heart with fear. Every corner of the city felt heavy, as if time itself had slowed. The Dracian people waited and whispered, asking one another what the humans wanted, but no answer came. The High Council held another emergency meeting this time. Their voices were not filled with laughter or pride this time. They were quiet, filled with questions and worry. One of the generals, named Varix, spoke first. He said the humans might be bluffing, that maybe this was just a show of force, and nothing more. He suggested sending a strike to test their strength. Another council member said that was dangerous, that they should try to communicate again and find peace before doing anything else. But Varix was firm. He believed the Directions were still the most powerful race in the galaxy, and no forgotten species could challenge them. While they argued, the people below panicked. Stores closed, families stayed inside. Drones flew above, scanning for movement, and fear spread faster than light. The news showed old pictures from scrolls recovered by Eldermach that showed strange symbols and strange ships, not Dracian, not Calari, not Bryn, something older. The symbols matched the ones now glowing on the black human ships. Eldermach stood before the council again, his voice calm, but full of weight. He begged them to listen to history. He told them that long ago, before the Directions reached the stars, humans ruled trade routes, built peaceful colonies, and helped weaker species rise. But fear grew among the Dracian leaders back then, and they joined others to wipe out the humans. They used massive weapons and scorched the surface of Earth. They destroyed the moons and poisoned the sky, and believed all humans were gone. The council did not want to believe it, but the evidence was there. They had tried to erase the truth, but the truth had returned. Varix did not care. He still believed strength would decide the outcome. So he gave the order to launch a warning strike, not a full attack, just a single missile aimed near the fleet to show power. The missile was fast, powerful, and bright. It flew high through the dark sky, leaving a trail of fire behind. The people of Xeron watched in silence as it flew. But before it could even reach the edge of the fleet, it vanished again, not exploded, not redirected, just gone like dust in the wind. Then the human ships moved for the first time. Slowly, carefully, they adjusted their formation, creating a shape that covered the sun, completely turning day into night. It was not an attack, but a message. We are here. We are watching. We are not afraid. Suddenly, every screen flickered again, and the same voice returned, colder, this time louder. You destroyed Earth. We remember. The council chambers shook with silence. No one spoke for a long time. Even Varix looked unsure now. Then more screens lit up across the planet, showing images that no Dracian had ever seen before. Images of Earth before its fall, blue oceans, green forests, children laughing in cities made of glass and stone. Then came the fire, the missiles, the ash, the screams. The final image showed a small human child holding a flag covered in dirt and blood before everything turned black. The voice returned one last time that day. You took our world. Now we take yours. On the streets, people cried, others held their children tight. Drones stopped moving, as if frozen by fear. Talran watched from his outpost high above the city. He gripped his weapon, but knew it would be useless. These were not simple enemies. They were not raiders or rebels. They were ghosts from the past, carrying fire and memory. He turned to his commander and asked, what now? The commander had no answer. Meanwhile, Eldermach walked through the central archive, unlocking doors that had been sealed for centuries. Inside were recordings, ancient logs, maps, and names, all erased from modern knowledge. He found a recording from a human pilot, her voice broken but proud. If you find this, know we tried to live in peace. Know that we gave you gifts, we shared the stars, we asked for friendship. But you burned our homes, you took our sky. We will return, and we will not be kind. He brought this to the council, but most were still frozen, still unsure of what to believe. One young member stood up. Her name was Alana. She had studied alien cultures and had always questioned the lies in their books. She said they needed to stop pretending they could fight this. She said the only way forward was truth. The truth scared them more than war ever could. Outside the city, the people gathered near the large viewing screens, watching the ships in silence. Children asked what humans were, and parents did not know what to say. Some said they were monsters, others said they were heroes returned for justice. One thing was clear: no one could go back to the old ways. The past was here. The directions had ignored the warnings of history. They had believed lies for too long. And now the sky was full of answers. Dark, cold, silent, but not empty. Tel'Aran looked up once more and whispered again the word that now felt heavy. Humans. In that moment, the people of Xeron did not feel like rulers of a galaxy. They felt like students before a storm, learning again what power really looked like and what it meant to forget. Now the question was not how to fight, but how to survive what came next. The silence after the warning was long, heavy, and full of fear. The sky remained dark, the ships remained still, but the people of Xeron knew nothing would ever be the same again. In the central tower, the High Council gathered. Once more, their eyes tired, their voices low. No one laughed. Now, no one doubted the truth anymore. Varix, the general who once believed in power, sat with his hands folded, his voice quiet, as he asked, "What should we do?" Elder Mock stood near the large screen, showing the human fleet above their world. He said the time for lies was over. They sent a message to the fleet, one simple message written in both Dracian and ancient human language. "Why are you here?" The message was sent through all channels. The waiting began. Minutes passed, then hours. No reply came. The planet waited, holding its breath. The people stayed in their homes. Some prayed, others cried, some watched the sky without blinking. Then suddenly, every screen, every device, every speaker came to life. A single voice spoke, cold, strong, clear. It spoke in perfect Dracian. "You destroyed Earth. We remember." The voice paused for a moment. Then it continued. "We gave you peace, you gave us fire. We gave you friendship, you gave us death. Now we return, not for revenge, but for truth. You erased us from history, but history cannot be erased. You took our world. Now we take yours." The voice stopped, and the silence returned. No one in the council moved, no one spoke. Then Elder Mock opened an old file on the table. It showed a secret record from a time long gone, a map of the stars with Earth marked in red, a list of names of the alien races that attacked the humans. At the top of the list was Dracian. "We started this," he said softly. Suddenly a light flashed on the council screen. One of the human ships was sending a message. It was not a voice this time, but an image. A small human ship landing in fire, a child stepping out, holding a broken flag, then vanishing into smoke. The message was clear. They were showing the beginning of the end, and now the beginning of the return. Across the planet, more images appeared, ancient human cities burning, Dracian soldiers in old armor attacking colonies, children screaming as the sky turned red. The truth was no longer hidden. It was flying above them. It was written in the sky. The council sent one final message, hoping for peace. They said, "We are not the same directions from the past. We ask for a chance to fix this. We want peace." For many minutes, there was no reply. Then a single ship broke formation from the fleet. It moved slowly toward the surface, glowing with blue light, its engines quiet, its path clear. It was not a weapon. It was something else. The people of Xeron watched as the ship entered their sky, without sound, moving with grace and power. It landed in the empty square before the council tower. The ground shook slightly as its legs touched the earth. No guards approached, no one dared to attack. Then the door opened. From the smoke, a figure stepped out, tall, armored, covered in strange symbols, glowing softly with silver light. It was a human. Her eyes were sharp, her steps calm, her armor shining in the dark air. She looked around the square, then walked forward toward the council gates. Tel'Aran watched from the wall above. He had never seen a human before, only in old scrolls and blurry images. Now he saw one with his own eyes, and she looked not like a monster, but like something made of memory and fire. The council door opened slowly, and the human woman stepped inside the chamber. She stood before them without fear. "I am Commander Arya of the Earth Remnant Fleet," she said. Her voice was strong, but not angry. "We have returned not to destroy, but to remind. Your past crimes cannot be undone, but your future can still be shaped. We offer one chance, one path. Truth." She held out a small device no larger than a stone. "This contains your true history, every lie removed, every truth restored. You will show this to your people and the galaxy. You will speak the truth, or we will. And the galaxy will decide who you are. Cowards, liars, or something better. Then she turned without waiting for an answer and walked out of the chamber. Her ship rose into the sky and returned to the fleet. The council sat in silence, again the small device still glowing on the table. Elder Mock picked it up and placed it in the center for all to see. "This is our only chance," he said. Outside in the streets, the people waited. They looked up at the fleet still covering the sky, but they no longer felt anger. They felt something else. Guilt, fear, hope. Telran stood on the wall and whispered to himself again. Humans. They came back not to end us, but to make us remember. And now we have one chance, one choice, to speak the truth or be buried by it. The sky remained dark, but the meaning had changed. It was not just a warning now. It was a mirror, and the directions were finally seeing what they had become. Duran was no longer the same world. The silence that followed the visit from the human commander was not peace. It was the kind of silence that comes before a storm of silence, so deep it made even machines pause. The council chambers were dim. The small glowing device still sat in the center, untouched. It held truth, but truth was heavier than any weapon. Outside, the sky had not cleared. The fleet remained like a second ceiling above the world, unmoving, silent, watching. People no longer walked with pride. They looked over their shoulders. They whispered in fear. They stayed indoors and looked up not at the stars, but at the shadow that blocked them. Then, without warning, the human ships opened. No missiles, no lasers, no sound. Instead, dark pods dropped from the ships, thousands of them, falling like rain from the edges of the fleet. They fell fast, glowing with soft red light, spinning as they came. Telran stood on a northern watch post. When he saw the first pod strike the ground, it did not explode, it opened. A single figure stepped out, tall, armored, silent. The human moved like a ghost. Within minutes, more pods hit the ground across the capital, across cities, across hidden bases and defense zones. Each pod carried one human, one soldier. The Dracian forces tried to react. Alarms echoed across the cities. Drones lifted into the sky. Turrets activated. Shields flickered on, but it was already too late. The humans were faster. Their weapons were strange. They made no sound. They flashed with light, and entire defense towers vanished into thin air. Some humans moved without being seen. 1 second, they were standing. The next, they were behind enemy lines. Systems shut down. Buildings went dark. Machines froze midair. The directions tried to fight, but they were fighting shadows. Varix himself led a squad to confront one of the landing zones. He believed honor was found in battle, even if the battle was lost. He found a group of humans near the old communication hub. They stood quietly scanning the area, not attacking, not speaking. Varix shouted at them, demanding to know what they wanted. One of the humans turned slowly, his armor reflecting the fires in the distance, his voice calm like water. "We want you to remember." Then he raised his hand, and the ground beneath the Dracian soldiers cracked. Their weapons failed, their suits powered down. Varix fell to his knees, not from injury, but from the weight of the moment, from the realization that the directions had never been prepared for this. This was not a war. This was a reminder. All over Zeron cities he fell in his silence, not from destruction, but from surrender. No civilian targets were touched. No homes were burned. Only military outposts, government centers, and the main archives were reached. The humans were not there to take lives. They were there to rewrite the truth. At the central broadcast tower, a human squad entered without force. They found the old servers and placed a single glowing cube into the system. Screens across the planet turned on all at once. They showed images again. Earth before the fall, children running across green fields, oceans wide, and blue skies filled with peaceful ships. Then came the fall, the attacks, the fire, the faces of those who died looking into the cameras. Then came the message. Your history is false. Your peace is stolen. We return not to rule, but to remind. Do not forget us again. Some directions cried as they watched. Others simply sat and held their heads. Their world was falling without a single bomb. Elder Mock watched from the old archive building as human soldiers walked through the halls, scanning and recording. They did not speak. They did not destroy. They only watched. He approached one of them and asked why now. Why after all these years? The human soldier looked at him with tired eyes. Because the stars forgot. And when the stars forget, the darkness grows. Then the soldier continued his task, scanning the scrolls and loading them into his ship. In the Western District, Talran and his unit were ordered to hold the line, but no one attacked. Instead, a single human walked into the street and stood there waiting. Talran approached, his weapon lowered, and asked, "What do you want from us?" The human answered, "We want you to remember." Same words again. Always the same message. In the capital, the council sat in silence, still watching the screens, still hearing the voice of Earth. Alana finally spoke. She said, "The choice is clear. We cannot undo what was done, but we can make sure it is never done again." She picked up the glowing truth device and walked to the main chamber. She placed it into the central core and activated the global link. Now the truth would reach every corner of Dracian space, every colony, every ship, every school. There would be no more hiding, no more erasing. The truth was free. As the sun tried to rise again behind the dark ships, the human fleet shifted slowly, moving into a new position, no longer blocking the light, but letting it pass. For the first time in days, sunlight touched the city once more. And with it came a feeling not of victory, not of defeat, but of change. Real change. Telran looked at the sunrise and whispered to himself, "The sky burns, but not with fire. It burns with memory, and memory cannot be stopped." The planet of Iran no longer looked like the home the Directions once knew. The skies were brighter, now not because the fleet had vanished, but because the truth had landed harder than any weapon. The people had seen the images, they had heard the voices from the past, they had watched the last moments of Earth as fire rained from above and the surface cracked under endless attacks. But most of all, they had seen the faces of the humans, not angry, not wild, just broken. Broken and forgotten. Elder Mock stood deep in the old archives far below the capital city. The halls were cold and silent, the lights dim, the walls lined with scrolls, sealed boxes, and dusty terminals untouched for hundreds of years. He walked slowly, his fingers brushing across the edges of the records that no one had dared open for generations. Then he reached the center room where the truth was kept. He placed a small scanner on the old lock, and it blinked once before clicking open. Inside were files hidden since the old Dracian empires ruled, before the new government, before the shining cities, before the fake peace. He opened the first file, and his heart grew heavy. There were reports from Dracian generals' plans for joint attacks with other alien races, maps showing the human colonies marked for destruction. There were logs of conversations full of fear, not of war, but of growth, fear that humans were advancing too fast, fear that humans were becoming too strong, fear that humans would one day lead the galaxy not with power, but with kindness and wisdom. The Directions could not allow that. So they made a plan. The first silent war. That was what the records called it. It was not a war shown on screens, not a war sung in stories. It was a war fought in the shadows with poison and silence. The humans never saw it coming. The records showed how the Directions joined with others in secret. They sent false peace offers to human leaders, and at the same time sent bombs to their cities. They shut down human satellites, they blocked trade, and blamed it on others. They attacked colonies in the night and left no trace. And when Earth was weak, they came together and finished the job. The last entry was from a human pilot named Commander Lin. She wrote, "We offered peace, we gave knowledge, we opened the stars to all. You gave us ash. One day we will return, and we will not be kind." Mock closed the file and held it to his chest. This was the truth that had been buried under glass towers and shining lies. Back in the capital, the council had gathered again. The truth device, now connected to the core systems, showed the real history across every corner of Dracian space. Colonies were in shock. Students asked their teachers why their books had lied. Soldiers stood down, confused and broken. General Varix no longer shouted, no longer ordered troops. He sat in silence, watching old footage of human children playing on a moon that no longer existed. Alana stood before the council table and said, "The truth is out. We cannot run from it. We cannot hide. We must ask the humans not for mercy, but for guidance. Not because they are stronger, but because they remembered. And we forgot." The doors opened, and Telran entered carrying a small item in his hand. It was a Dracian medal once given for service in battle, now bent and scorched. He placed it on the table and said, "I do not want to be honored for a lie. I want to be remembered for helping build something better." Outside the city, human ships floated silently above, watching, waiting. They had not attacked. They had not burned the planet. They had given a choice. Remember or repeat. In the homes across Iran, people began to speak of humans not as myths or monsters, but as survivors, as teachers, as a mirror. And in that mirror, the directions saw what they had become. A race afraid of growth, afraid of sharing, afraid of change. Now, they had a chance to change, to remember, to choose truth over power, and maybe one day to stand beside the very people they once tried to erase. The city of Iran no longer buzzed with pride and noise. Instead, it stood quiet and thoughtful as the truth continued to spread like fire across every part of Dracian space. Every screen played the old memories of Earth. Every speaker whispered the message from the past. Every heart carried the heavy weight of forgotten crimes. Yet the humans had not attacked. They had not taken land. They had not destroyed cities. They had only watched and waited. It was this silence that frightened the directions most. General Varix now wore no armor. His medals removed, his voice changed from command to regret. He walked the streets alone, watching the people as they gathered to talk, to cry, to understand. In the center of the city, near the large statue of the first Dracian emperor, a group of citizens had formed a circle holding signs not of anger, but of apology. They painted human faces on walls and placed lights under them like candles. It was not fear that filled the city anymore, it was shame. Inside the High Council chamber, Alana prepared a message. She would send it not only to the human fleet above, but to all the Dracian colonies across the stars. She stood before the main screen, her voice steady yet soft. "We have lived in darkness, pretending we were the first, pretending we were the strongest. We now see the truth. We were not the first, and we were not wise. We were afraid, and our fear gave birth to fire. We ask now not for forgiveness, but for the chance to learn from those we wronged. We ask humanity to speak to us, to guide us, to help us rebuild not our cities, but our soul." She sent the message into the sky where the human ships waited. And then the waiting began again. Above the city, the ships shifted slightly, not to attack, but to make room for a smaller vessel, one shaped like a tear glowing with a soft blue light. It descended slowly, landing in the center of the city where the people had gathered in silence. The door opened and a single figure stepped out. It was Commander Arya, again her armor shining in the morning light, her face calm but unreadable. She walked toward the crowd. No guards, no weapons, only a small device in her hand. The people stepped back, making a path as she moved through them. Children watched her with wide eyes, elders bowed their heads, soldiers stood still. She stopped before the great statue of the first Dracian emperor, the one who had signed the ancient pact that led to the fall of Earth. She looked up at the statue, then placed the device at its base. The device lit up and began to project images not of war, but of peace. It showed human children learning in schools, directions, and humans working together in what could have been. It showed dreams that were never allowed to grow. The people of Ziran fell to their knees, not in fear, but in respect. Then Commander Arya spoke, not to the council, not to the leaders, but to everyone. "We were never your enemy. You feared what we might become, but we became what we had to. Survivors. We learned to live in the dark. We built ships in silence. We carried our memory like a weapon, but we never forgot how to hope. And now we stand here not to rule, not to destroy, but to offer a final path. Learn with us or lose yourselves again. This is your last stand, not with guns, but with truth. The choice is not ours. It is yours." She turned and walked back to her ship, leaving the device still glowing at the foot of the statue. As the ship rose into the air, the people of Iran began to speak to one another not with fear, but with purpose. Inside the council chamber, Varix stepped forward for the first time since the invasion. His voice was no longer sharp, but steady. "We have seen the truth. We have felt the shame. Now we must take the step forward. Not with pride, but with humility. He looked at Elder Mock, who nodded slowly. Mock then opened the final archives, the ones no one dared open before. They contained the names of every Dracian leader who signed the attack order on Earth, every commander who erased records, every historian who silenced the past. Their names would now be known, not to punish, but to remember, so that it never happens again. Across the galaxy, Dracian colonies began to follow the same path. Old scrolls, open statues, removed streets, renamed children taught not to forget. And above every city, one thing remained constant. The silent ships watching, waiting, not for surrender, but for honesty. Telran stood near the central square watching the crowd. As they spoke, shared stories, wept, and finally smiled. He looked at the stars, now no longer as places to conquer, but as places to explore with respect. Beside him stood Alana, who whispered, "Do you think they will stay?" Telran answered, "Only if we earn it." The sky above Zeron began to clear as the human ships slowly turned their lights, shifting from red to white. A signal of peace, a sign of a new path, not written in fire, but in memory, and maybe, just maybe, in hope. The ships no longer hovered with threat, their lights now warm and clear, casting soft glows across the cities below. For the first time in recorded Dracian history, a day passed without orders of expansion, without drills, without silence of truth. Instead, every screen showed human history, every wall displayed murals of Earth, every classroom echoed with questions once forbidden. Commander Arya had returned to the orbiting flagship. She watched from high above as a species began to rediscover what it meant to be alive with truth. Her ship was silent, filled with officers who had trained their whole lives to fight, but now stood still, unsure if battle was even needed. She stood at the main window, arms behind her back, mind sharp, heart heavy. She had led a ghost fleet across galaxies, not for revenge, but for memory, and now the memory had taken root. Still, she did not smile. Peace is not given, she once said. It is a fire you must keep burning. And the fire had only just begun. On Zeron, Telran walked through what used to be a military street, once lined with weapons and fear, now turned into a corridor of learning. Each wall painted by children, each corner filled with questions. Why do they fear us? What is Earth like now? Can we visit? He had no answer to most, but he walked with them, listened to them, answered what he could with the honesty he had only recently learned. Beside him, Alana helped organize the memory garden, a place where both Dracian and human names were carved into crystal. Not just names of heroes, but of everyone, even the forgotten ones. Especially them. General Varix now worked in the Truth Archives, helping others read old files, translating ancient Earth languages, and guiding new historians. He no longer wore medals, instead a patch on his chest that read "Remember Earth." He had once led a fleet to erase. Now he led minds to preserve. In space, the human ships remained. They did not land in large numbers. They did not take territory. They simply stayed, watching, teaching, helping only when asked. They had brought no gods, no kings, no demands. Only memory and warning. Across the Dracian colonies, great fires were lit, not of war, but of ceremony. They called them the Nights of Reflection. Every citizen sat around flames, listened to stories once hidden, watched the stars above, and whispered promises to never forget again. Some directions still feared the humans, but now they feared disappointing them, not because humans would punish them, but because they had become something greater. A mirror. And in that mirror, the directions saw themselves not as lords of space, but as students of time. Commander Arya sent one last message across the galaxy, a message not of command or demand, but of invitation. To all who once feared us, to all who erased us, we do not ask for your shame. We ask for your curiosity. We are not your myth. We are not your punishment. We are your future if you dare to learn. A new alliance began, not with papers, not with parades, but with quiet meetings, shared meals, stories told side by side. Young Directions began learning English while humans tried to understand the Dracian tongue. Artists painted both worlds blended together, poets sang songs of stars without borders, and children on both sides asked the same question. Can we build together? And slowly the answer came. Yes. but not fast, not all at once. Together does not mean perfect. It means honest. It means effort. It means never forgetting again. Years passed. The ships in the sky became fewer, not because they were leaving in anger, but because they were no longer needed in fear, only needed in trust. Dracian ships began to visit Earth not as conquerors but as guests. They saw the blue ocean's Greenland's ruins still untouched by time, and they left them that way. Not as trophies, but as sacred memory. In the great halls of Ziron, a new monument was built, not of a general or emperor, but of a child holding two flags, one Dracian, one human. Below it, a single line was carved. Memory is stronger than fire. Commander Arya finally returned to Earth, walking alone through the quiet forest where once great cities stood. She looked at the trees, the wind, the soil. She reached down, picked up a stone, and placed it into a small pouch. Not for science, but for soul. She walked to a small hill where a single bench waited, and there sat Telran, now older, his eyes soft with time. "You came back," he said. "I had," as she replied. "We kept the fire burning." He nodded. "So did we." They sat in silence, not as soldier and alien, not as threat and survivor, but as two people who remembered. And across the stars, in every system where directions lived, a new holiday was born. Earth Day, not to celebrate victory, but to honor truth, to remind all that silence can be more dangerous than war, and that forgetting is the first step to ending all again. But now they knew better. Now they chose to remember. Always. Together. The stars above no longer belonged to one race. They belonged to all who dared to carry the memory. And in that memory, the human flame never died.